This video is sponsored by NordVPN. Protect yourself online today by visiting nordvpn.com/totallynotmark for a special offer. In the summer of 2015, after an 18-year-long hiatus, Dragon Ball returned to television, running for 131 episodes, finishing in the spring of 2018. Later that same year, Dragon Ball Super Broly became the highest-grossing Dragon Ball film in history. During that same time period, Dragon Ball became as popular as ever, entertaining old fans and attracting new ones. So a few weeks back, I decided to ask on my Twitter, if given the choice between Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super, which series did you prefer? With over 2,000 votes cast, these were the results, with the overwhelming majority voting for Dragon Ball Z over Dragon Ball Super, 77% to just 23. And these were some of the most popular reasons folks gave for choosing Dragon Ball Z. They felt the characters were more tightly written in Z, arcs didn't feel disconnected or isolated like in Super, and the art styles it was presented in seemed to be more favorable. However, regardless of these reasons, 77% of the folks on Twitter still consider Dragon Ball Z a cut above Dragon Ball Super. So before we begin this video, let's see what you guys on YouTube think. Which is better? Cast your vote in the top right. It's obvious that Dragon Ball Super was missing something, a spark that Dragon Ball Z seemed to possess. And so today, I want to take a look from a writer's perspective at what Dragon Ball Super did right, what it did very wrong, and why I think Dragon Ball Super Broly could mean great things for the series once it returns later this year. Let's dive in. What worked and what didn't? To understand what didn't work in Dragon Ball Super, we must first understand what worked in Dragon Ball Z, and most importantly, why it worked. And unsurprisingly, with a show like Dragon Ball Z, to find what worked and what didn't work is a rather simple enterprise. Firstly, the moments that have worked on the show have become some of the most standout nostalgia trips for the entire series. For these moments, I am of course talking about scenes like Piccolo protecting Gohan, the Goku turning Super Saiyan transformation for the first time, the Vegeta sacrificing himself to save his family and friends, etc, etc. However, something that's observed when looking at most of the large successful moments throughout Dragon Ball is that many of them, while grand and spectacular, are successful because there's an emotional component at its core, with history. When he was first introduced, Piccolo Jr. was after world domination, but at the climax of his arc, gave up his life for his sworn enemy's son. It wasn't just the fact that this was a nice thing Piccolo did for Gohan that made it as emotionally resonant as it was. Instead, it was the contrast of where he had been at one point in his life many years ago. It's for this very reason that the ending to the Tournament of Power worked in some respects. The combination of Goku and Frieza fighting side by side was something no one could have ever seen coming given their history, and it's that contrast that made it so exciting to watch. It was their journey. And it's that long-form storytelling that was sorely lacking in Dragon Ball Super. I made a video in January called Son Goku, the Misunderstood Character, in which I spoke about how Goku's character is at its best when it creates change in the world and characters around him. If we look at Piccolo, Gohan, and Vegeta as examples of what character development can do for a series like Dragon Ball Z, imagine if we were to replace their arcs with the arcs found in Super. Stagnant, not undergoing any sort of development or change that affects the long term, just plodding along doing their thing. I can assure you, as a result, in Z, those moments wouldn't have worked. Gohan, Piccolo, and Vegeta all had to overcome themselves and their lies they believed. And so, if we strip the characters of these elements, then they become significantly less interesting, and the show suffers as a consequence. Goku doesn't work as a flat character alongside them as a result, and the entire show loses these great moments we love to discuss. Character development. What's worth mentioning at this juncture is that Super was not devoid of developing characters, and as I mentioned before, it's in these moments Goku does some of his best work as a character. Characters like Hit, who developed a respect and appreciation for Goku's philosophy, Zamasu, who because of his warped understanding of the world around him and Goku's actions, changed for the worse, and finally Jiren, who despite being very cliche, did undergo a considerable positive change towards the end of the series. So Super is most definitely not lacking in characters who develop, but what it is lacking in, and this is where it differs from Dragon Ball Z quite considerably, is how long these characters are part of the story for, and whether or not they influence the story in any meaningful capacity thereafter. But before we get into the best part of this video and how Broly fits into all this, Towards the end of last year, as many of you I'm sure are aware, Article 13 threatened the livelihoods of thousands of European creators as well as the online freedoms of millions. With net neutrality acts rearing their heads in the United States relentlessly, Article 13 now in Europe, and whatever I'm sure is to come, I am proud to announce that NordVPN has decided to sponsor this video. I don't normally accept sponsors, but believe me when I say this one is worth it. If you want to protect your personal data or search history, have peace of mind with or without Article 13, or maybe you just want to surf the web from another country, NordVPN is not only the answer, but is ridiculously easy to use, and if you follow the link in the description, nordvpn.com/totallyNotMark, you'll find it's incredibly cheap too. Currently the offer is 75% off for 3 years. That's military grade internet security for the price of a cup of coffee, $2.99 per month. And if you use coupon code TotallyNotMark, you'll get an extra month absolutely free. Again, if you'd like to protect yourself against Article 13 or net neutrality, or perhaps want to support this channel, please check out the link nordvpn.com/totallyNotMark in the description to see it for yourself. It's a terrific service. Now, back to the video. One of the most cutting and accurate criticisms made against Dragon Ball Super in retrospective was how disconnected and isolated its arcs felt from one another. In Super, there was a visible effort made to connect the Battle of Gods arc to the Resurrection F arc, but outside of that, none of the other arcs tie together at all. Instead, the series treats every individual arc after Resurrection F as almost its own standalone story, typically with little or no consequences lasting after the closing episode of that given arc. There seems to be an intense desire for those working at Toei, or perhaps Akira Toriyama, to write something with a conclusion wrapped up in a bow, when in reality what made Dragon Ball Z feel like a grand space opera was the very opposite. It implemented the following arc structure. In the beginning there is the ending of an old life, the taking up of a new one, and it all ends with a question. This can be observed over most arcs in the original run of Dragon Ball. When we pick up with Goku at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, he is living a modest life with his son Gohan and his wife Chi-Chi. But that life as he knows it ends when Raditz arrives and reveals that he is an alien from the planet Vegeta before stealing his son away. This triggers his new life where he must defeat Raditz and travel to King Kai's planet to prepare for Vegeta and Nappa. The arc concludes with a savage confrontation, but also with a question. How will they revive their fallen friends? And will Vegeta travel to Namek to find the Dragon Balls too? During the Namek saga, Goku's life as an Earth fighter ends as he begins his new life as a rebel to the forces of Frieza, during which his life as he knew it ended beginning anew as the first Super Saiyan in over 1,000 years. Ending on the question, if Goku survived Namek, why isn't he coming home? How did he survive? Similar to the Saiyan Saga's final question asked of the audience, bleeding over into the Namek Saga's beginning, so too does the Namek's ending bleed into the Android Cell arc, where Goku learns that time travel exists, the human race is going to be destroyed, and he will die to the heart virus. This marks the end of Goku's current way of life and marks the beginning of a new one where he will take the measures necessary to preserve the Earth, a new view that allows him to see that his son is the future, eventually arriving at the very end of the arc with the question, will we ever see Goku again? Not only does this method breed intrigue around the community watching, thus ensuring a larger turnout for the coming arc, but it also creates a larger sense of continuity, a sense that this story is going somewhere as opposed to it being its own standalone piece, finished and complete arc after arc, much like Super has done. And the interesting thing about this philosophy of story writing, when put next to Dragon Ball Super, is that while not used in the arcs, Super does implement this structure in almost every episode, and one that demonstrates this better than any other is episode 47. In this episode, Trunks' life as he knows it ends with the death of his mother Bulma. This also marks the beginning of his new life as an orphan fighting to escape to the past, alone, ending with the question, will Trunks escape? And for the audience, who is that? The problem I see with Super's arc structure is that all of them seem to be isolated with no effort put into tying them together to create a sense that this is all one grand story rather than 5 segmented ones. Resurrection F ends with Frieza's death. There are really no consequences carried over into the Universe 6 tournament arc as a result. Everything seems very separate. The last episode of that Universe 6 tournament arc sees Beerus make a selfless wish on his brother's behalf, representing an easing of tensions between the two, which was established at the beginning of the arc. Everything ends neatly and has no carryover to the beginning of the future Trunks arc. There is no cliffhanger question that is asked of the audience, and there is no overarching development of a particular character to tie it all together. The form Super Saiyan Blue did not work for this very reason. It didn't seem special because there was no established story behind its conquest. Goku simply shows up and has it in the movie, while in the show, in a very short period of time, they achieve it. The Super Saiyan form was something told over a much longer time span in Z, and upon its unveiling, made a huge moment in anime history. And this is precisely why the form Ultra Instinct landed and worked much better than Super Saiyan Blue, as it was hinted at from the beginning of Dragon Ball Super, between Goku and Beerus fighting on King Kai's planet, as well as Whis lecturing them while training at various instances. Ultra Instinct seems like it was destined to happen since the beginning, preordained, and because of that, when it shows up, it works. Super introduced loads of new characters: Beerus, Whis, Togama, Sorbet, Hid, Zamasu, Gowasu, Jiren, among many others in the Tournament of Power and the series throughout. However, most of them didn't develop at all, and the few that did so while restricted to one specific arc. Now, in the case of characters like Cabba, who did technically develop over the course of the show, and it does help characters like Vegeta become more compelling, he is on his own a very minor character that offers little to the story beyond being a pupil to Vegeta. Unlike Gohan, Piccolo, and Vegeta, who, during Dragon Ball Z, impacted and guided the plot at irregular intervals by being active characters within the story. Cabba is a reactive character. The story happens to him. But recently there has been a character that's been introduced, one that is interesting, has so much more to tell, and one that we have yet to see develop fully. And that character is... The canon introduction of Broly to a series like Dragon Ball could not have come at a better time. Despite being a relic of a more nostalgic era, the worldwide positive reception for not only this film but also the Broly character has been nothing short of overwhelming. Initially painted in Dragon Ball Z as an angry, one-dimensional muscle monster, with Akira Toriyama's pen he has become a sympathetic, complicated, more nuanced character full of endearing qualities to go along with a tragic backstory. However, Broly brings much more than simple tragedy. He brings what I believe to be promise. Towards the end of the film, after having been defeated, Frieza remarks that he needs an ally if he is to win against Goku and Vegeta in the future. It's heavily implied that this ally he has in mind will be Broly. In that same breath, the movie ends with a scene between Goku beginning to build a relationship with Broly. These were important moments to me because it indicates future plans for a power struggle to gain Broly's trust over the coming arcs. This is not only interesting and fits perfectly well within Broly's character, who rightfully should have a host of trust issues at this point, but most importantly teases something the initial run of Dragon Ball Super was sorely lacking, something that will enrich Goku's archetype and the flow of the show, a new main character that will develop over the course of the series alongside the main cast. Dragon Ball Super Broly has provided the impending Super anime's return with a chance for long-term, multi-arc spanning character development, packed with personality and intrigue, a crucial element for any long-running show, one that's absence caused the initial run of Dragon Ball Super to feel needlessly disjointed and disconnected. Something was missing, and oddly enough, the character that once represented everything I disliked about Dragon Ball might now represent everything I think Dragon Ball needs. Quick or non-existent character arcs, disconnected sagas, and boring revisions of classic moments are the biggest sins of the initial run of Super, I believe. And with everything said and done, the missing principle, the missing practice, and the missing ingredient might be rediscovered through Broly. Thanks for watching.